So welcome everybody. Glad you've joined us tonight. Maybe some of you are familiar with our webinars. You've joined us in the past. Some of you may be brand new to this. We during COVID, we did a whole bunch of Zoom webinars. They seem to work out good. There's pros and cons to this, but we're glad you're here. And this should be very informative given the year we're in and the drought that we're facing and some of the issues with landscape irrigation. So just as introductions, I'm David Rice with Weber Basin, and we host these classes. We've got Eric Marble with Chanshare Farms with us tonight. You know, this is the family business for them, lawn, and so we appreciate him coming on to be able to talk about lawn in this period of drought, the drought cycle, and issues that we face with this. So maybe before we get started, though, just as a way of the management of the Zoom, there's not really a good way to allow you to speak without, changing some settings and doing something. So the raise your hand button, if you do that, it's going to be hard to call on you. We'll see that there's a hand up, but it's hard to have you ask a question. So please type your question in the control panel. There's the Q&A box. If you will please just type questions into that box. We'll pause. Eric will answer those, or I'll be able to answer those as we go. And we'll get your questions answered as we go through this. And so that's what we'd prefer that you do on the questions. As far as writing down information, this webinar is being recorded. We're going to post this onto our website, weberbasin.com, the same place you found this, hopefully, to register. You may have registered, I'm pretty sure you registered this way. You got the Zoom link. So we'll post this on our website as a video. The slides for this will also be posted separately just for slides if you'd rather just look at the slides. And so you can share this information with others that maybe weren't able to be here. Share the link or let them know to go to our website and find that. So I think with that, you're all aware there's drought restrictions. Oh, I think this is kind of important before we get into the lawn. To avoid a lot of public confusion, that just really briefly on water rights and water law in Utah, it gets very complex. So I'm not going to get into complexities. And if you're asking some more in-depth questions, this will probably be something we'd need to have a discussion on over the phone or something later. But water law in Utah, it's based on a time, first in time, first in right. Now, that means legal water rights are different than water shares or allocations. If you have a legal water right, which many entities do, like irrigation companies, Weber Basin, Pineview Irrigation, Davis and Weber Canal Company, have legal rights, and some ag users, lots of people have water rights for different sources of water, different bodies of water. You may have a water right for a certain amount of water in Pineview Reservoir, or you may actually have a water right for a well. And those rights give you legal right to use the water at a certain time and certain volume. And it's based on the timing of when that right was established according to state law. So what you'll see right now in Davis and Weber counties, there's several different irrigation entities, and those entities have water rights in these bodies of water, but those water rights date differently. Weber Basin actually happens to be a junior shareholder in the Weber and Ogden rivers. We do a lot of treatment of drinking water, so our primary thing is municipal water, but when it comes to agricultural rights and even the secondary water, we're a junior shareholder, meaning some of these other entities have the first right, and it's based on reservation or elevation of the reservoirs. So if Pineview Reservoir, for example, is only half full, well, the water right holders that have right to the first water, they'll be able to use that water. They have a right to it, and even though the reservoir is only half full, they are the first right holder, so they can use it. So this is sometimes it leads to a lot of confusion, where Pineview Irrigation might have restrictions this year of only 2 days a week, and we're going to have one of 1 day a week. Well, the difference is we actually may not have any water in Pineview this year as Weber Basin, because the reservoir won't fill sufficiently to provide the water for our water right there. So I hope just a little bit of that understanding can actually appease or at least help you understand why certain areas may have some different restrictions in place because of the water that they actually have to use. Now, in a bigger picture, sometimes you shake your head and say, well, that doesn't make any sense because the reservoirs are still low. But legally, they have the rights, and getting into water law and policy and all this stuff gets very complex. But that's just a really broad overview. I hope that helps going into just some of the drought restrictions and why there's differences. We can literally have people across the street from each other that may have different restrictions based on who provides their water. And so hopefully that helps. I think with that, Eric, we will go ahead. I'll turn it over to you and we'll just move ahead.
Hey, sounds good. I appreciate it, David. And I appreciate the opportunity talking about this because it's definitely, as you mentioned before, I'm with Chanshare Sod Farms, and we established Chanshare Sod Farms in 1979. It was my dad, my grandpa, and all of my uncles. We're now on the third generation. My grandpa's exited, my dad and all my uncles are exited, and so now my cousins and I are kind of the ones that are running the sod farm. But having said that, like, we've been growing turf for almost, let's see, 79, so 21 plus 22, 43 years. And we spent a lot of time like figuring out how best to grow and maintain turf, and how to figure out, and we figured out like really the best way in order to have turf in our region, and the best types of turf that are suited for our region as well. And so I'm glad for the opportunity to share some of that information with you, and hopefully we'll belay some of the worries that everybody has about maintaining their landscapes in a drought year. We'll be talking about watering, we'll be talking about maintenance, fertilizing, we'll be talking about browning out your lawn in the middle of the summer, when to do that, how to do that, and how to bring it back from that, what to watch for when you're doing that as well. And then also in your landscape, like which plants are the most important. So if you have to choose between watering, say, trees and shrubs, like which ones are the first ones that you want to water, and then which ones are the most resilient and going to be able to bounce back from a drought as well. Let me just reiterate again what David said. If you have a question to ask, please type it in the chat, in the Q&A. And then if it hasn't been answered in a timely manner, you can raise your hand and that will clue us into to the fact that it's in the Q&A. And I'm hoping to leave enough time at the very end to answer all the questions. And if not, then we'll definitely make sure that there's an opportunity for us to get all those questions answered. Melanie and Tim, I see that you've got a hand raised. So we will talk about park strips.
Eric, I'm going to go ahead and answer. I'm going to answer that with the park strip question. And if I see multiple of those questions, we'll just address it more broadly after.
Okay, sounds good. So you're just going to type it in, David, or?
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and type that one in.
Okay, sounds good. So just to start out, again, like we're focusing on maintaining your lawn in a drought, and then also expanding that a little bit into your landscape as well. But we'll just kind of go at it, and okay, here we go. So we live in a cool season climate, and the difference between a warm season climate and a cool season climate. A warm season, you don't have as many extremes in temperature as in a cool climate. And so you have to have a different type of turf. Warm climate grasses, as you can see here, this is the growth cycle for a warm climate grass. It has a little bit of growth in the blade and a lot of growth in the roots in the winter, and it maintains that root growth. It can maintain that root growth all the way through all 4 seasons. But as you can see, the difference here is that the blade growth increases in the spring, gets the highest amount of blade growth in the summer, and then in the fall it starts tapering off towards the winter, and then has minimal blade growth in like through the winter. So that's a warm climate grass. And types of warm climate grasses are zoysia or St. Augustine. They're a little bit coarser than cool season grasses, but those type of grasses also cannot stand the freeze cycles that we go through here in Utah. So they're really not like in, and again, we've got a different climate in northern Utah than we do in southern Utah. So you may see different types of grasses in northern Utah than there are in southern Utah. But it's important to understand this, especially in a cool climate where you've got cool season grasses, to understand the growth cycle here. So a cool season grass has got basically 2 growth spurts throughout the year. And these are determined by the amount of like the high temperatures and the low temperatures that you receive. So a cool season grass will start growing at about 50 degrees temperature. And you can see through the spring, the middle of the spring, you'll get the greatest amount of blade growth. And consequently, because you're getting the greatest amount of great blade growth, your root growth in the spring is going to be enhanced as well. And so as temperatures rise, that kind of wakes up your lawn and gets it ready for the growth season or the growth period. But then once temperatures hit about 85 degrees, as you can see, as we're coming into summer, the 3 hottest months in the summer is when that blade growth really slows down. And the root growth slows down as well. And it's because the temperatures are higher. And so the grass goes into kind of a dormant mode. And then as the temperatures start dipping below 85 degrees, then there's another growth spurt that happens in the fall and goes throughout the middle of the fall and then into the winter. And again, once the temperatures reach about 50 degrees, it really stops the blade growth and the root growth and goes more into a hibernation mode. And understanding this is really important because it helps us to know how to take care of our lawns in different seasons. It's not just a point of in the spring, you need to set your sprinkler system and forget about it. You really need to treat it differently in the spring than you do in the summer, and in the summer than you do in the fall, and then in the winter as well. Like if you maintain your grass in a proper manner, then you can actually get blade growth, or excuse me, root growth throughout the winter if you get down below the freezing point in the soil. So again, keep this in mind as we're talking, because this growth cycle will determine when we can run out of our lawn and when we should maintain it more and when we should concentrate a little bit more on, say, growth promoting activities like fertilizing and other things. So that's an important thing to think about, is the growth cycle here. So one of the reasons why why we wanted to do this before the water turned on, the secondary water turned on, is because like spring maintenance, especially of your lawn, is very critical on setting up your lawn in order to be water-wise during the summer. Like the earlier that you start bringing your grass out of that dormant period, the more water it's going to need during the summer and the more maintenance it's going to need throughout the year. And so, like I said, spring maintenance is extremely critical. So suggestions for you is, first of all, wait as long as possible to mow, water, and fertilize. And I know this is sometimes hard because like our grass or our landscapes get different amounts of sun. And because of the different amounts of sun, you may have part of your yard that's really tall and really long grass, and then part of your yard that hasn't started growing yet. But waiting as long as possible to mow, water, and fertilize. I always think about this as like when you wake up from a nap, if you wake up from a nap with like a blaring siren, like it puts you into kind of shock. But if you take a Sunday afternoon nap and you get enough sleep and your body just naturally wakes up, most of the time you're going to feel a lot more refreshed and a lot more ready for what's coming at you, a lot more clear-headed than if you were woken up by that siren. And your grass is the same way. Like if you let it just naturally go into that growth cycle from the winter to the spring, then it's going to just have a great time pushing those roots down into the soil and having that blade growth naturally. And so it's really important, again, to wait as long as you can to mow, water, and fertilize your grass. And then when you're ready to start kind of waking up your grass and getting it ready to grow and green up and everything, dethatching it is a great way to start the growth cycle. Now, dethatching, the best way to do that is just to take a metal rake and to rake over your grass. And doing that in the spring, and then taking all of the organic material that's there, that's left over from the winter, and just removing it from the top of the grass will actually help it. It's almost like tickling the grass. And it's like, okay, I can start growing now. I know that I need to start doing that. So one way that you can start the growth cycle without mowing, watering, or fertilizing is to dethatch it. And again, just using a metal rake is probably the best way to do that. I'm going to back up a little bit here. And then the biggest thing to watch out for in the spring, especially if you don't mow, water, or fertilize until late in the spring, is you want to just watch out for weeds during this time. Because again, early spring, when it's starting to warm up, those weeds can kind of come in and infiltrate that natural barrier that cool season grasses create to choke out weeds. And so like either hand weeding or putting on some kind of a herbicide, broadleaf herbicide in the early spring is a way for you to kind of keep the weeds out and let the grass just kind of spread out, and again, push those roots deep into the soil and let the blades grow as well. So just be careful and watch out for weeds during the spring and that early time. Another thing that you can do in order to get your grass ready to really be water-wise during the summer is to aerate. Now, we recommend that you aerate at least once and possibly twice throughout the year, depending on the type of soil that you have. And the important part, or the important thing to think about here with soil is that, like, soil affects the amount of water that can be retained in that water table, and how deep and how quickly it filters through that. And so, like, if you've got if you've got clay-based soil, that's going to compact really easily from like traffic and everything like that. And so for clay-based soils, you need to make sure that you're aerating at least twice a year. And what happens with aeration is it kind of pulls the plugs out, which then loosens up the soil, and that lets air, water, and nutrients get down easier to the root level. So again, if you've got clay-based soil, you need to do that probably 2 times a year. If you've got a sandy loam soil, that's probably the most optimal soil for filtration and water retention, and then also to prevent compaction. But if you've got sandy loam soil, then you can aerate just once a year. And then if you've got sandy soil, then aeration is not as much of a concern. But again, pulling those plugs out opens up the soil bed. It allows the water to get down into there. When you do aerate, you want to make sure that you leave the aeration plugs on the lawn, because that organic material will break down and go back into the soil bed. And so that's a natural way to retain some of the nitrogen and the other plant products that can help your lawn to grow. And then another thing is to watch out for bugs, like bill bugs and grubs. And so a season-long grub control, we recommend that you do that between late April and the end of May. And that's really important, especially in a drought, because again, like, as you cut back the amount of water that is on your lawn, it's going to start pushing those roots into the soil to kind of chase the water, but it does initially make it a little bit weaker. And so if it's weaker and it's affected by bugs and it's affected by weeds, then that makes it a little bit harder for you to maintain a healthy lawn that way. So again, we recommend like a season-long grub control between late April and the end of May.
Eric, maybe before you transition to the next thing, there were a couple of questions about timing. One was, can you dethatch now?
Okay.
And then
yes. So yes, you can dethatch now, but again, the same thing, like I mentioned before, like when you dethatch, like one of the things that it does is it opens up that soil bed, and it allows the air, water, and nutrients to get down into there. And so that's a natural way for you to kind of promote your lawn to start moving out of that hibernation stage. Now, what you want to do, and I see Jerry there that you said that you've heard that bluegrass should not be dethatched. Now, a commercial dethatcher is like it's like there's a machine that will go through and it uses like metal to kind of claw at the ground. There's a natural thatch layer that's at the top or at the base of your blade, and that helps to kind of protect the top of the soil bed from evaporation. And so having a thatch layer is good. What you don't want to do is pull out so much of the dead material that you're actually pulling out the live material as well. And so that's why I recommended just doing it by hand and using just like a metal rake and going over it, because that will pull off enough of the dead inorganic material that may be preventing air, water, and nutrients from getting down to the roots, but it won't ruin the blade and it won't pull up the roots. So Jerry, again, dethatching is a great way to do it. And you asked if it was better to aerate. Aeration, again, that gets a little bit further down into the soil than dethatching. So aeration will actually open up the soil a little bit more. You can do both if you'd like. If you were going to do both, I would say dethatch first and then aerate. But again, I would recommend not using a commercial machine to do that, but rather just good old elbow grease and get out there with a metal rake and pull it off. So, and then Bethany, you asked about sandy soil. Sandy soil is not an issue. What happens with sandy soil is the water filters through the soil a lot quicker. And so it will actually, sometimes the water will get down past the roots quicker than if you were on sandy loam soil. And so we'll talk about watering a little bit later and how your soil will determine how to water and how to keep that the water level from going past the roots there. And then Sydney, signs of grubs. The signs of grubs, basically, if you've got an area where it looks like you've got a patch that's starting to die off, and it'll usually creep in like kind of a scraggly line from that center patch. What you'll do is you'll go and just kind of grab at the center of that and pull the grass up. And if the grass comes completely up, then chances are that you've got some kind of a bug in your lawn. And if you look at, actually, if you go to Chanshare's Facebook page, we will have, I've got in the videos something that talks about the difference between dry grass and grass that's infected with grubs. So that video would answer that question a lot better than what I can explain to you right now. Anyway, if you pull up the grass and it comes right up down to the soil, then you've likely got some bugs in it. And again, you want to get on that earlier than later, because the more widespread those bugs are, the more damage that they can do. So if it doesn't respond to watering and it still remains gray, then that's probably a sign that you've got bugs as well. If I need to aerate twice, when is the other time? So spring, early spring, and then late summer would be the 2 times to aerate. So
Eric, one more question. I hope
yes,
my speakers still sound okay. There was one more question about Bermuda grass and managing Bermuda grass when it's hot in the summer. You know, it seems to thrive where your Kentucky bluegrass is going to be struggling a little. And I don't know if you're going to address that later or not, but that was a good question.
So Bermuda grass is a warm season grass. It's not a cool season grass. And so it will thrive in the summer. It has that longer, you remember on that one slide that we were at before. In fact, I'll go back to it. So you remember on the top here, we've got the warm climate grasses. A Bermuda grass is a warm climate grass. And so it does have a longer growth period, and it will grow through the summer because of the heat. And so maintenance on the Bermuda grass is just like, again, watching the amount of water that you put on and when you put that water on, when you start cutting back. If you compare Bermuda grass to bluegrass, again, if you're in northern Utah, because you've got the fluctuations, such a wide range of temperatures, the bluegrass is going to be able to kind of bounce back on all those conditions a lot easier. But the Bermuda grass, as you mentioned before, it will kind of thrive a little bit better in the heat than the bluegrass will. And so difference in maintenance is just like what we've been talking about as far as thatching, uh, aerating, and like watering deep into the soil. Like those things all still apply whether you're in a warm season or a cool season grass. So really the only difference is to kind of take note of when the growth cycle is, and then make sure that you're kind of watching that and maintaining your lawn according to the growth cycle rather than necessarily just again, you don't want to set it and forget it at the beginning of the season. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. If not, we'll have them type in additional follow-up questions. And then one last thing, Karen, you have your hand up. If you'll just please type in a question, and then we'll address the question you had as well. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll move on and talk a little bit about new sod and established sod, because again, like there's going to be a difference in watering as well. And I know that I've had a lot of people, homeowners and landscapers, ask whether they're able to plant new sod this year, especially where it's in a drought. And the answer to that is it depends on how quickly you get it in. New sod usually requires more than an inch of water per week for the first month to establish. At the very first week, we recommend that you actually, in order to give it the most likely chance of its success, we recommend that you water, a quarter inch every day, which then ends up being like 3 inches total for the week. So again, it's harder to establish new sod if you're not able to give it water on like on a daily basis. However, new sod can succeed on an inch of water a week if it's planted before the daytime temperatures hit 85 degrees. And this goes back to the growth cycle that we looked at before, because again, once that temperature gets above 85 degrees, a cool season grass says, oh, this is extreme. I need to hibernate. I need to focus on my roots and pulling that water out of the soil. And so if the roots aren't established down into the soil and it doesn't have a big water table to pull from, then it makes it a little bit more difficult for it to be established. So as long as if you lay sod before the daily temperatures, at least 2 weeks before the daily temperatures start hitting 85 degrees, then you should be able to establish that on 1 inch of water. But another key to that is do not mow it for at least 3 to 4 weeks. Because again, like grass, if you think about it, it's a plant and it's living and it's growing, and all of a sudden you cut it. And so that signals to the plant, oh, I need to focus all my effort and energy on regrowing that green part of the plant so that I can do photosynthesis again, because photosynthesis is life for your plants. And so once you cut your grass, then it goes into that mode of, okay, I know now that I need to regrow that part of the plant so that I can continue to live. So it's important to not mow for at least 3 to 4 weeks after you plant new sod. So this is our general watering skill for new turf, and I'm not going to leave this up here for very long. This is what we would normally recommend. Again, as I mentioned before, you can establish new sod if you do it before the temperatures reach 85 degrees and you don't mow it for 3 to 4 weeks, so that it gets a good chance to get those roots down far enough into the soil where it can chase the water and draw from the larger water table. Now, I know that there's a lot of worry. Go ahead, David.
I was just going to say, and we don't disagree with anything that Eric is saying here with the establishment of sod. The one challenge you're going to have this year, if you're thinking of doing new sod or new seed, with the restrictions in place of only 1 day per week, that's where it becomes a huge challenge, because you can't water it. It needs water very short cycles every day for that first little bit. And that's where the restrictions get really hung up. And we know that with drought restrictions, it's about volume. But when you're trying to enforce different things in different areas, the blanket things that go out of 1 day a week, that's just the mechanism of enforcement. And sadly, it makes it hard to try to do something, even though you can be very efficient, you can be using less. The days of the week type thing are still enforced. So be careful. One thing we've tried to be telling people here is that, as we start to get closer to summer, it's going to be much, much harder to do this anyway. So we're suggesting maybe you hold off and then in the fall you get your lawns established. But again, I'm just going to kind of leave it at that.
Okay, definitely. Okay, so let's move on to established turf. And we'll talk a little bit about this. Again, like there's a lot of worries because 1 day a week, that seems really scary with your lawn. But as you can see here, and this is our watering schedule that we've given everybody for 20 years. So 1 inch every 10 to 14 days in May. We don't recommend anything more than that because normally you're going to have lower temperatures. Your grass isn't going to need as much. And if you don't put a ton of water on it, then it doesn't force it to come quickly out of that hibernation mode. So 1 inch every 10 to 14 days in May. June, you cut that to 1 inch every 7 to 10 days. July, 6 to 7 days. And then as it starts cooling off, then you can extend it so that you're not doing as much. So this is for you to keep your grass green like all through the summer. And again, it's definitely manageable to do it 1 day a week and to be able to keep that lawn green that way. Now, if we're thinking about reducing your water footprint and everything like that, then the best thing to do is to just watch your lawn and to be able to cut back as much as possible. Lawns that are used to receiving a little bit of water every 3 days are going to get thirsty at first, and it's going to take a little bit of time in order for you to get those roots down into the soil so that it can again draw from that larger water table. And so at first you may see your lawn struggle a little bit, but as you continue to water deeply and infrequently, then it's actually going to train your lawn to be able to thrive in more extreme conditions with that. I read really quickly through several of the questions, and several of the questions will be answered as we go through this. And so I think I'll continue going on, and then at the end, David, I think it'd be a good thing for us to just hit everything else that we haven't got.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And then we've got until 7:30, correct?
You know, I kind of planned for about an hour of instruction with some time for questions, but if it needs to go just a little longer or goes a little shorter, that's all okay.
Okay, I think I'm talking too much. So I've got a lot of information, and so I may kind of hurry this along a little bit, but hopefully I'll catch on everything that we talked about. Now, part of maintenance and part of being able to cut back on your watering is fertilizer. On a normal year, as you can see on the left here, normally we recommend fertilizing 4 times annually and putting no more than 1 pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet on your lawn in each of those applications. So normally we would recommend that you fertilize on Memorial Day, Independence Day, Labor Day, and Halloween. And if you do that, then that gives your lawn just kind of like a balanced food throughout the year. The absolute most important fertilization that you do in any year will be the ones that you put on at the end of the season. So we recommend Halloween and putting on a winterizer fertilizer, which is balanced, and it has NPK values that are as close together as possible. So a 16, 16, 16, or something with just as balanced numbers for the NPK values as you possibly can. And the reason why that is important is, as I mentioned before, if you get your roots deep enough into the soil and you give them nutrients before they hibernate, they'll actually continue to push those roots further down into the soil during the winter. And then in the spring, you're already set up to have those awesome roots that pull from a deeper water table. Now, in drought conditions, we recommend that you pull that back to just 2 times a year. So we recommend, instead of doing 4 fertilizations throughout the year, that you cut back and just do one fertilization around Memorial Day and another one around Halloween. And then just to make sure that you're vigilant about weeds. And again, the best way to eradicate weeds is to pull them out by hand. Like we've got some other natural ways that you can actually take care of weeds. Like a vinegar spray is one way that you could do that, or pouring, pulling the weed out as much as you can and then pouring boiling water down the hole. Like that burns the roots. So those are a couple of natural ways that you can take care of weeds. But again, because of the fact that your grass isn't going to be getting as much food as it normally would, then it has a tendency to kind of lighten up on the web of the natural weed barrier that comes with rhizomatous grasses. And so just be careful about weeds when you do that. Now, let me move on and talk about landscaping in order of importance with landscaping. This came from Utah State University, and it came out last week, and I think it's way awesome. But this shows you, like, during a drought, like, what do you prioritize? Like, what do you need to focus on most? You're watering most. And the first thing is trees. The trees are going to they're going to be affected like quite a bit in your landscape by the lack of water. So make sure that you're watching those trees and giving them enough water. Next is shrubs. Shrubs are similar to trees. They're basically mini trees. And so the same thing. And any of this green space is perfect. It's really good because it provides oxygen. It filters the air. It also helps to retain the water and filter the water as it goes down into our aquifers and everything. So trees first, shrubs are the next neediest. The next after that is perennials. And again, the perennials over time will push those roots deeper into the soil. So as they're more mature, they're going to require less water. Annuals, again, they've got a really short root base. And because of that, they can't stand the extreme heat without water, or they can't stand the winter. And that's why they're annuals. And then last is turf grass. And turf grass, of all the plants in your landscape, grasses are the toughest. They'll enter dormancy during times of drought and recover when conditions improve. So again, don't worry about your grass as much as far as like the water restrictions. You still need to maintain it. There's still things that you need to do. However, if you need to cut back watering on parts of your landscape, you know, turf grass is probably going to be the one that's the most resilient of everything that you've got in your landscape. So that kind of gives you an order of importance on that. Now, watering, first of all, know that water makes up about 70% of grass plants. And so when you cut your lawn, if you remove the grass, the clippings from that, you're stealing water basically from it. However, if you leave the clippings on it, again, as you can see here, clippings are about 80% water. And so those kind of break down and return the water, and then also the nutrients that come from organic material back into the soil. And so your lawn isn't going to need as much fertilizer or as much food in order to stay healthy. Most homeowners damage their lawn by overwatering. Again, if you're watering too much, then like your grass, it's like, I don't need to stress in order to get my water. I can just sit back here and I don't really need to do anything. So it's a matter of making sure that you get that water deep into the soil, and then water deep and infrequently. Now, let me talk really quick about how to retain water in soil, because somebody asked about the sandy soil, sandy loam soil, and then also clay soil. The way that you water is going to be different. Somebody asked about times, because if you can only water for 20 minutes, but your lawn, like if you've got clay soil, sometimes watering for 20 minutes, you're going to get runoff. And if that's the case, then what you need to do is break it up into shorter cycles. So on your day for watering, instead of running each station for 20 minutes, run a station for each of your stations for 5 minutes, 4 times. And what will happen, and this is for clay soil and also for sandy soil, what will happen is that water will, on the clay soil, it'll just kind of percolate at the top, and then it'll slowly trickle down into the soil bed. And then as it continues to go in the soil bed, there's an air layer that goes between that and the next cycle. And then the air layer, once you put the water on it, it pushes it down further into the soil. And so again, by doing that 4 times for 5 minutes instead of all in 20 minutes, then it kind of produces different layers of water and air and water and air. And then that kind of holds it in without it having runoff. And that does this, it does kind of the opposite when you're on sandy soil. So the water will go in, and then the air will come, and the air will actually hold the next application of water up higher. And so again, if you're doing like sandy soil, then I would do like 2 cycles of 10 minutes rather than 4 cycles of 5 minutes. And that again will hold it closer to the roots so that it doesn't fall through the soil bed before the roots can get at it. Watering techniques: grass roots grow only as deep as they need to get water, and if you water deeper and longer, the roots will grow deeper and longer. So determine watering practices by watching your lawn. Try to apply the needed water in one application if possible. That's if you have the right type of soil. Sandy loam soil will retain the moisture without causing it to run off. But if you have clay soil, then you can't do that in one application. And if you have sandy soil, then a lot of times it's not good to do it because the water gets off. If your lawn goes dry between watering breaks, break that into watering on several days. I know that we can't do that this year, but that's the optimal. So once we get back into normal conditions, then that may be a better way for you to do it. Instead of having 4 cycles on one day, you have 2 cycles on one day and 2 on another day. But at this point, since you've only got the one day, then break those cycles up into those ways. Reading your lawn, this is basically just looking at it. And if you come to a week where your lawn looks great, it doesn't look stressed at all, don't water, especially if you've had like natural precipitation. So read your lawn. If it will turn a kind of a blue-gray color. There will be one section that generally turns that blue-gray color first. And once you see that, then it's a signal that you do need to water. But again, if you receive precipitation or if your lawn doesn't need it, then don't water it. You don't need to. Like it's pretty easy to see visually when your lawn is stressed. Another way to look at it is if you walk across your lawn and after about 60 to 120 seconds, the blades are still, you can see where your footprints were, then you can see that that plant needs more water. So again, on your day, if you see that it's stressed and it needs some water, then make sure you water it. If it doesn't look stressed, then don't worry about it. Now, this is just a real quick, short 2-minute video that talks about browning out your lawn. We'll go through that and then go on to the next.
Hey guys, Alan Hain here, the Lawn Care Nut with another lawn tip. Now today we're going to talk about watering your lawn during a summer drought. As I'm sure a lot of you know, we're going through one of the worst droughts we've had since probably 1988. Because of that, a lot of you are not really sure what to do when we have this type of a dry spell. The first thing to realize is it's okay to let your lawn go into summer dormancy. This is really kind of a defense mechanism that the lawn has, almost like humans in an induced coma. You can see this is what a dormant lawn looks like. It's not very pretty, but I can tell you that it's surviving. Turf only needs about a ½ inch of water a month just to stay alive. As long as the crowns stay alive, the lawn will be just fine. And when we get cooler temperatures and, of course, more importantly, moisture, the lawn will start to come back. Next, if you do decide to water in the summer during the drought, you have to remain consistent. The worst thing you can do is allow your lawn to go in and out of dormancy. In other words, it's brownish and then you water it and then you stop and it goes back to brown or back to dormant, and then you decide to water again and bring it green again and bring it out of dormancy. Go back to when I compared this to an induced coma. It's not healthy for humans to go in and out of a coma many times in a row, and it's definitely not healthy for your lawn. If you are going to irrigate,
Oh, sorry, my bad.
on during a summer drought, as I'm sure a lot of you know, we're going through during a summer drought. As I'm sure a lot of you know, we're going through.
Okay, we're gonna go on. The end of that, he was talking about like if you look at your lawn and there's some parts that are green and some parts that are gray, you notice those first pictures, like the whole lawn was like brown and gray, and that's what you want when you're putting it into dormancy. You don't want some patches that are green and some patches that are brown and everything. Like if you see that in your lawn, you most likely have an irrigation problem, and you just need to check your sprinklers and make sure that the coverage is head to head and that it's equal coverage. So you don't want like one of your sprinklers to be spraying up and another one to be spraying down. You want them to be spraying at equal pitches, and then also to go from head to head. So browning out your lawn, how do you do this? As he mentioned before, cool season grasses only need about a ½ inch a month to survive. And so if you decide to brown out, this is a great way to conserve water. What you want to do is wait for temperatures to rise above 90 degrees. Make sure that you don't fertilize for about 4 weeks before that. So I know you have to anticipate a little bit, but that's an important thing, because if you fertilize, you're signaling to that grass, hey, you need to grow and you need to grow fast. So you want to keep the fertilizer off of it for about 4 weeks. And then make sure that you don't mow it for 1 to 2 weeks before you start putting it into dormancy. So then you can go a period of about 4 to 6 weeks without putting any water on it. And again, a 1/2 inch a month is needed just for it to survive. And the crowns of the plants will still be healthy, but the blades will be all brown. Okay. And then to bring it out of dormancy, you start to water and fertilize. Now, a key to all this is make sure that you're not mowing during that time as well. Because again, if you mow, if you fertilize, if you water, you're signaling to that plant that you want it to grow. And so if you're going to brown out your lawn, then make sure that you prepare in advance. So 4 weeks in advance, don't fertilize. Make sure you don't mow for about 1 or 2 weeks. Cut the water, make sure that it gets about a 1/2 inch at most in a month. And then to bring it out of dormancy, you start watering, like bring it back to a normal water cycle, and then you fertilize, and that signals to the plant, okay, now I have food, I can come out of dormancy. Now, mowing, this is an important thing for saving the amount of water. And there was a question about this before. You want to mow. I know that there's a tendency a lot of times to think, you know what, a well manicured lawn is beautiful. It looks great. But if you're cutting it super short, then again, that plant is spending all of its time trying to regrow the blade, because it has to go through photosynthesis in order to survive. So if you're cutting it really short all the time, then all it's doing is spending its energy on that blade instead of the roots. And so we recommend that you mow your grass at 2 inches or higher. And if you can, raise your mower to as high as you can go and just do that. Another thing is to never cut more than 1/3 of the plant off at a time. And the reason for that is if you cut more than 1/3 of the plant at a time, it puts it into that shock mode where it says, okay, now I got to focus all my energy on this thing. Whereas if it's about 1/3 of the plant at a time, it's like, oh, that's maybe uncomfortable, but I don't necessarily need to put all my energy into the blades. I can still continue to push those roots down further. Leave your clippings on your lawn. We talked about before how a lot of the water and nutrients in the clippings will return to the soil if you leave them on there. Make sure you root those out, because if not, then you might get some organic or dead material that prevents the air, water, and nutrients to get down to the roots. Remove thatch when necessary. We talked about aerating in the late spring and late fall. And this is another key to think about. Like a lot of times you don't think about it, but keep your mower blade sharp. If you mow and the next day the tops of the blades look yellow, then it's tearing the blades instead of cutting them. And a clean cut is actually going to be a lot better for your lawn than tearing it. Tearing it puts it into shock again. So again, it needs to focus all of its energies on recreating the blades. And so make sure that you have a sharp mower blade. Usually you can replace your mower blade for $10. And if you replace it at the beginning of the season and then in the middle of the season, or anytime, like if you ended up having to mow down weeds or somewhere where you had rocks and stuff like that, then I would recommend either sharpening your blade or buying a new blade. But make sure that that's sharp, because that will help your lawn to require less water. Weed and pest control. Weed fertilizer is good at pre-emergent. That will take care of many weeds, and you apply that in the spring. Or if you're only doing the 2 applications like I talked about before, then you would apply that now and skip the one on Memorial Day, or you would wait, and if you can wait that long, apply it on Memorial Day. But as I mentioned before, hand weeding is the most effective form of weed control in most cases. Make sure that if you see a weed in your lawn, that you get that weed out before it flowers, because if it flowers, that means that it's got enough of a root system that it can throw those flowers up. And with things like morning glory, it can take 7 years or more in order to get all those roots out and kind of get them out of your lawn. So again, hand weeding is the most effective. A couple others, if you do vinegar on the blades of the weeds, then that can kill it. And then also another option is to just hand weed it and then pour boiling water down there, which scorches the roots and allows it to die. I think I just kind of blew through everything here. So here's a couple of resources for everybody. Chanshare.com, we have a residential lawn care guide that's on our website. We've also got a fertilizing and watering guide that you can go. It's just on the main page and you can download them directly from there. Drought.usu.edu has a lot of good information about watering landscapes. Localscapes is a great program, and we're a partner with Localscapes. Basically, the principles of Localscapes are creating landscapes that are fit for our local climate, but then also work for us as far as recreation and utilizing our landscapes. And so Localscapes is a great program. And then conservewater.utah.gov, that's another way. And that talks more about, or conservewater.utah.gov includes information about inside your house, how to save water, and then also exterior, how to save water on the outside. So lots of information. Somebody asked about park strips before. And again, there's a lot of municipalities right now that are paying people to flip their strips. We don't recommend putting grass in park strips. And the reason why is because it's really hard to water there. And then like on the side of your house, like where you've got like narrow passageways and stuff like that, it's really hard to give it enough light and to give it water to properly water it. And so because of that, we don't recommend putting grass in park strips. We do think that you should have some green, organic material there, because again, you want that oxygen transfer. You want, green plants sequester the carbon and then they release oxygen. And so you definitely want green in your landscape. But just find other plants that are easier, that don't require as much water and that will thrive on drip irrigation for your park strips. Okay. That's all the information I had. So David, did I miss anything as far as Q&A?
There's a few that we could discuss with everybody. And then let me just remind the few people that have raised your hand. I didn't see you ask any questions. So please just ask your questions in the Q&A box and then we'll address those. But a couple of people had asked the same question about the time of day watering and what would be recommended, daytime or like night, going into the night, or early morning. So if you have recommendations for that, go ahead with that.
So we recommend early morning. And the reason is, number one, your water pressure is going to be a bit better because not as many people are showering and washing dishes and washing clothes and stuff like that. So water pressure is a big deal about that. But also, if you do it in the early morning, the temperatures are going to be less. So you've got less evaporation that happens. And also, the cooler temperatures then allow the plants to kind of absorb that and recover from the heat of the day as well. So yes, early morning is when we recommend doing your watering.
There was also a question, and I actually get this question quite a bit right now, related to Revive, the product Revive, which is actually just a surfactant or a wetting agent. So I don't know if you have any comments about wetting agents, when drought cycles and that kind of thing.
We haven't really studied wetting agents. Up on our farm, we've got sandy loam soil, and so because of that, it's able to retain the moisture really well. Surfactants, I'll have to do a little bit more research on that, David, because we really haven't tested much of that. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so I get this question a lot, so I did some asking around with Utah State, and we've done a little bit of looking on products. There's quite a range of products related to surfactants, or what they call wetting agents. Revive is one of those. You can buy it off the shelf at Home Depot or Lowe's, anywhere. It's actually kind of a lower grade product, and not bad. And surfactants, I guess, maybe to help people understand what a surfactant does, it actually just it's an interaction between water and soil, and the chemistry of soil and the capillary action, the cohesive properties of water. Sometimes water sticks to itself or doesn't necessarily move into soils because of certain soil composition and just how water reacts with itself, water molecules. So a surfactant, what that kind of does, it allows the tension on water to kind of be broken apart. So it allows water to move into soil quite efficiently. And then depending again on soil composition, it can help hold water in the soil a little longer. But it's all soil dependent. And so just a broad statement of surfactants are going to do the job may be incorrect. It has a lot to do with soil composition, and it has a lot to do with, you know, your water interacting with that soil composition. So heavy clays, if you get a surfactant, it might actually help water move into the clay a little faster. And then with sandy soils, depending on the product, it may help hold water a little longer, but there are different surfactants. One example, there's a company called Precision Labs that makes a lot of these. One product called Cascade is used to help water move into soil. There's a whole different product for helping it retain in the soil. And these can get quite expensive, and not knowing, you know, how much and when, there's a lot of timing there. And as Eric said, there's actually not a lot of research. Utah State has been using these. They've done some trials with these and been using it on their campus for years. And they do say that they've seen an improvement in lawn quality and a reduction in water, but I don't think there's a lot of printed documentation about it. So use your best judgment there.
So I was looking at the 4 unanswered questions that we have here. Melanie and Tim said, isn't a pre-emergent type fertilizer more effective way to control weeds in your lawn? And yes, pre-emergents are definitely much better than post-emergents. Like once those weeds have gotten their roots down, and it makes it a lot harder to eradicate. So a pre-emergent fertilizer is definitely better than a post-emergent fertilizer. The only caveat on that is, again, if you're wanting to decrease the amount of water that your lawn requires, then less fertilizer is going to go a lot longer of a way. And so because of that, instead of using a pre-emergent fertilizer, please use a pre-emergent herbicide. And so what I would recommend is that you use the pre-emergent herbicide without the fertilizer in it in the early spring, and then use a fertilizer like around Memorial Day, and then do that again at the end of the season if you're looking to do that.
So I think I'll answer the next one about limited on 1 day a week watering instead of spread over time. What Eric has just described is the most correct way on a normal year. You would spread out that irrigation, you would water at different times. The whole reason around a 1 day watering on a restriction instead of spreading out is if we don't have any way to measure that, so metered customers actually can do some flexibility because they're going to be held to a quantity, a volume of water, which is about 40% of a normal allocation. Unmetered secondary users, there would be no way to know if you're watering every day for an hour or every day for 2 minutes. In the sense of if somebody's patrolling and driving around trying to enforce a restriction where we're trying to reduce total volume, and that's the reason why 1 day or 2 day restrictions go into place. It's about enforcement and trying to help people follow and do something to change the behavior of reduction. And some people might just choose to ignore it. But if you have a 1 day, then you're held to that day. It's just an enforcement mechanism. But in terms of plant health, there's no doubt that there's certain things that could be done better. But as a water entity, as other entities, it is extremely difficult, which is these blanket things become very difficult on users and on the management side, because some people choose to ignore it and they kind of screw it up for everybody. But that's the reason why that's a 1 day instead of spread out over time. If you have a meter, if you're actually a metered secondary customer, you need to look into our user portal, because you can water multiple days, but you'll be held to a restricted volume instead of the days of the week. Maybe I'll address a couple of these others too, Eric. Is there going to be a class on garden maintenance? We've done some classes on just vegetable garden and other perennial type stuff. I would recommend looking at our website, and the pre-recorded classes that we've already done would be the first start, and then future things. When we talk local scapes, there's a section on maintenance. There's some stuff there. So Don, on your question there, check out some of the other classes we've done, but we have done some and we'll probably do them again in the future. Just so check those out and see what may work for you. And then Eric, I think one other thing that came up quite a bit is how do you know if there's how do you measure 1 inch of water or half an inch of water when you're irrigating? And I don't know if you want to talk about that or I can.
Sure. Like a simple way to do that is to put a tuna can out on your lawn and then run your sprinklers. And once it fills up, that's about 1 inch. So you can figure out how much water is getting put out. But again, remember that the time of day is important because your water pressure is going to be different in the late afternoon than it is in the early morning. So make sure that if you're doing that, that you do it at the same time that you're going to water. That's an easy way to do that. But David, what else? Like, what are some more technical ways to do that?
You know, that's actually the best way is unless you know the rate of application of water from your sprinkler heads, like if you've taken enough time to know, okay, this particular Rainbird nozzle or whatever puts out, 2 point whatever inches per hour, and you just do all the math, there's no way to do it other than sticking a straight cylinder, a tuna can, a straight cylinder, any kind of container that's straight cylindered, let it water, and then you just physically measure it. Take a ruler out there and measure. And after 20 minutes, you'll know how much water was applied in a 20-minute period. Let's see, there's a couple here that I can type in. One was about metered customers with Weaver Basin. That if you got a notice, a postcard or something, maybe it was misleading. Metered customers can water multiple days. You'll be held to a volume. Check our website for that. Check some details on the customer portal if you're a metered customer. And maybe if you're not sure if you're a Weaver Basin customer or not, there's a map on the district website that says who is my provider, and you can find your address and it'll be color coded and it'll tell you a phone number of who your provider is, and then you can kind of determine it from that. So check that out. Let's see. Can we request a meter for secondary water? The answer, yes, but due to actually lots of people requesting meters, there's a work order system being in place, and it's kind of a first come first serve type thing. As our maintenance staff are able to do that, they'll be installing meters this summer, but there's no time frame given for you if you request a meter. It'll be added to a list, but it could take a week, it could take 3 weeks, it could take 3 months. So not sure on the timing there, but yes, you could request a meter. Let's see, I think there was a question here about simpler sprinkler maintenance that we can do to maximize the benefit of 20 minutes. Do you want to address that, Eric, or do you want me to?
Certainly, just really quickly, some things that you want to look at is make sure that your sprinklers, sometimes they have a tendency to sink. So make sure that your sprinklers are up above, like where the grass is. And then I would mow or just hand trim close to the sprinklers so that sometimes you'll see that the sprinklers have like this long grass that's kind of pushed over right by the sprinkler systems. So make sure that that's trimmed back so that it's not preventing the flow of the water coming out of the sprinkler. And then make sure that your sprinklers are straight up or are angled according to the slope of your landscape where they're at, because you want a uniform spray. So like if your landscape is on a hill and your sprinkler is straight up, it's going to spray differently as it rotates. Whereas if it's on the same plane or the same degree as your landscape, then it's going to get more even coverage. But again, if you'll remember in that video, take a look at your landscape once you start watering it. And if you've got spots that are brown and spots that are green, then you know that your sprinkler system isn't adequate. It's not getting adequate coverage. So check how high it is, check that there's not anything obstructing the flow of the water coming out of the sprinkler, and then check to make sure that it's matching the slope of the landscape. Those are 3 really simple things to look for.
Great. And then there is a question you might be able to address, being that you deal with turf a lot more than we do. Is lawn paint a viable way to take care of your brown grass later in the summer?
I would say just let it go brown. I think especially like last year there was really good campaigns that showed people that it's okay to brown out your lawn, and So lawn paint, that's another thing that I really haven't studied, because why? It just seems like an extra cost to me. And it's okay to have a brown lawn in the heat of the summer. So I I I would say don't worry about it. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question too. We get that sometimes here as well. And our answer is the same. Is, I think as a society we've just become accustomed to maybe a social norm of it's got to be green and it's got to be this perfect thing all the time. If you get outside of the state, there's many areas that in the summer the lawns are brown and nobody worries about it. They know it's a natural cycle. These grasses, they go into a dormant period when it's not favorable and then they'll come out of it. And so I think maybe it's expectation somewhat is if we're okay just letting it go a little bit. The summer's hot, it'll just being okay with that condition, then we'd all be better off, I think, in the waterfront and healthier lawn front. But it does change it. It's a huge social expectation, to be honest, because some neighborhoods, I know how that is. There's a lot of social pressure. If your lawn's not looking a certain way, then you are the worst person in the hood. And so I'm with you, Eric. We haven't looked into a lot of paint stuff, but our opinion is let it go. It's going to be fine, and help your neighbors understand that it's healthy and it's going to be okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's see. There's one other thought here about worrying about grubs and weeds. Can she hire you, Eric, to to fertilize or take care of grubs?
Not me personally. There's a lot of really good companies around that can. And if you want to send an email or hop onto the Chanshare website and send a message to them, then I'm sure that they can recommend some that we've worked with. But if you want to do it yourself, like I would just go to like Lowe's or Home Depot and talk to the garden specialists there, and they can tell you what needs to be applied and when.
So maybe, Eric, there was one other comment about repeating information on the pre-emergent herbicide and fertilizer and kind of timing on those. Could you maybe just repeat that one more time?
Okay, so again, normally we recommend 4 different fertilizer applications in a year, but in a drought year, you should probably only do 2. You would do a pre-emergent herbicide separate from the fertilization early in the spring, and then you would fertilize around Memorial Day and Halloween. And then in the late summer, either a pre-emergent if you don't have a lot of weeds in your grass, or a post-emergent herbicide. But again, in years like this, I would recommend separating them. A lot of times you'll have the fertilizers that have the pre-emergent and the post-emergent with them. But like, again, when you add fertilizer, that's signaling to the grass that it needs to grow. And if it starts growing and it doesn't have the water, then that can weaken it rather than make it more strong.
Okay. And then there's another question about maybe, I don't know if you want to address the use of lawn when it's dormant.
Yeah. I would say, like, again, you're not going to damage the crowns by walking on them. So I would just, like, when it is dormant, just make sure that you're not, that, like, more of a question would be compaction. Like if you're out there using it so much that it's getting more compacted because there's less water and everything in it, then that's more worrisome than ruining the grass. So if you do use it quite a bit without water on it, it may have a greater tendency to have compaction. And if that's the case, then you're going to need to aerate again, like more frequently.
Great. And then I could maybe address this, and maybe you could as well. What about buffalo grass? I saw in our demonstration garden this year, we do have a couple of small plots of warm season grasses. Buffalo grass is a warm season grass, as Eric talked about at the beginning of the presentation. Very different growth cycles, different appearances. But buffalo grass is certainly a lawn that will work in our climate. It has a little bit different needs, different water needs. It looks different than Kentucky bluegrass or cool season grasses, but certainly as a drought tolerant warm season grass, buffalo grass will work here in our climate. And that's why we have it demonstrated here. It can be an alternative to cool season grasses, but there needs to be that expectation and understanding. It grows differently. So you have some different challenges. Sometimes you're dealing with spring weeds when it hasn't quite come out of dormancy yet. Fertilization requirements are different. Everything there kind of talked about related to warm season lawns would need to be applied there. But yeah, it is an option for sure. In addition to a few other types of warm season grass, blue grama grass, there's a dog tough grass, all of these, there's pros and cons. So do a little bit of homework. Make sure you understand what you're doing there with warm season grasses. And the two do not mix. Don't mix a warm and a cool together. They don't grow together. They don't play well. Basically what I've seen is Kentucky bluegrass would actually outcompete the warm season grasses over time because of the cooler seasons on our spring and fall, but don't mix the two together.
Definitely. Ditto. I agree.
Okay. Let's see. There's one.
Artificial turf. Crystal, I'm a grass guy, so I would say don't do it. And a couple different reasons why I would say that. Like, I think that you're not going to need to water it. However, artificial turf does not absorb sunlight and does not absorb heat like organic material does, like grass and green space does. And so because of that, if you have kids and pets that are generally using that, artificial turf, especially in the summer, can cause burns, and it can cause like just problems. Like if you're using your landscape, then you're using an area for grass, I would recommend putting it in a natural turf just because of the benefits of it. In addition to reducing heat, it also, like I mentioned before, sequesters carbon and releases oxygen. A 5,000 square foot lawn will actually produce enough oxygen for 4 people in a day. On top of that, environmental benefits include, like, if water goes through grass, it kind of filters the water so that once it gets into aquifers and underground storage systems, it's already cleaner than when it went into the ground. So there's many benefits to having natural turf. Artificial turf, I think, is good in some applications for sports, but in sports also, there have been studies that have shown that greater injuries and more severe injuries happen with artificial turf rather than natural turf. Again, I'm biased because I grow grass, but like, to me, all of the benefits of natural grass really outweigh artificial turf.
I could add to you kind of covered it. Artificial turf, if you've ever walked on it, we actually have a small plot here in our garden. Midsummer, that is like walking on an asphalt parking lot. It's hot.
Very hot.
And so, you need to know what it involves for sure, and it's very costly. And I'll just echo kind of what Eric said. There's some pros and cons to actual vegetation. But if you were going to do concrete anyway, well, then maybe artificial grass right in that space is fine. It looks green and it looks different than concrete. But if you're just,
but again, even concrete is gonna, like, it's gonna reflect heat differently than artificial turf.
Yeah.
And concrete, a lot of times it's gonna be cooler than the artificial turf. So, like, it's just a matter of, like, again, if you're gonna use the landscape, then put some kind of a green material in it. And if you're not gonna be using it a lot, then figure out a different type of plant material to put in there instead of a ground cover. But I'm kind of against artificial turf.
Yeah. So there's another question here. Do I need to water, or can I hold off a while longer?
Hold off.
Yeah.
Wait. As long as you can.
I
would wait to water until, like, at least mid-May. And again, if your lawn doesn't look too stressed, then wait until later. But again, don't mow, don't fertilize, don't water. Like, those 3 things. If you hold off on all of those, then your lawn's going to be a lot better off than, like, what you wouldn't want to do is fertilize it and mow it and then not water it. But I'd say as long as you can, hold off on those 3 things.
Yeah. So one thought with that too, a lot of the secondary systems are not being charged this year until mid-May. So you're not going to have secondary water till mid-May anyway. But as a general practice on any given year, the longer you wait to water, the better off you are, drought or not. And so that's kind of just a basic principle. But this year you're being forced to wait unless you're using culinary water. But we would definitely recommend you hold off as long as possible. And then, do you want to comment about red or white clover for replacement for lawn, or can it be seeded with regular grass?
I've seen that as a viable option. I would not seed it in with the regular grass. We preach a monocultural seed bed, just because you'll have a tendency, especially with variations in heat reflection from the house and from like shade areas and full sun areas, you'll end up getting clumps and like clumps of grass and then clumps of clover and stuff like that. So if you're going to put in red or white clover, then I would say you probably need to replace the grass in order to put it in instead of just seeding it in with the grass.
Okay. Well, for a minute here, that's all the questions. And for those that are still on, we really appreciate you taking a little time. I'll just turn on my video. We really appreciate you taking some time tonight. This year with drought, it's a particularly hot topic. It's on our minds how to do this stuff. But you know, coming from the water utility side, and I'm also a plant guy. My background is horticulture. You know, Eric and I, we know each other, and plants are important. Grass is actually important, but in the terms of water resiliency and some of the things we're doing, planned turf. That's what Eric was talking about with local scape type things, and it's thinking about the need of this grass in which spaces, because there's some areas it can certainly be taken out, and we can do other things that are watered more efficiently in narrow spaces, just odd shaped spaces. But there's nothing wrong with grass. Grass is a fantastic plant. All of us need to learn how to manage it better. It comes to water, just everything that Eric's talked about tonight, the water, the fertilization, the mowing, the aeration, understanding also the soil relationships. Too often, I'm talking to people all the time that you see what's on top, sometimes not thinking about what it's growing in. What is the soil doing? What's the soil health? How does it hold water and drain water and all these things? If you pay a little more attention to soil, you pay attention to cultural practice of that lawn, you can have very healthy and resilient lawns that are also drought tolerant. And Eric's been doing this for, you know, his family's been doing this for decades, and they grow this and they see this over and over and over. I think as consumers and users, sometimes we panic a little. We tend to just overwater because we see one little problem. Sometimes it's even a bug problem. It's not a water problem at all. It's bugs or it's something else, and we just dump the water on. Well, if we can't learn to manage and understand some of this stuff, that's when it seems policy and legislation start kicking in, which sometimes doesn't help the problem, sometimes doesn't fix things, but tends to happen. So our encouragement is learn what you can learn, start practicing the best practices, and you're going to be water efficient. And you'll also have beautiful yards. You'll have green grass. This year with a drought, you may not have green grass. It may go dormant, and that's okay. That's what Eric's talked about tonight. So we really appreciate you taking time, learning what you can learn, and hopefully sharing that with your neighbors. And this will definitely be posted up on our website. And Eric, do you want to add anything just to wrap it up?
Sorry, hit unmute there. I was just answering. Crystal had a question about soil composition.
Oh,
So let me see. She says, how do you find out what your soil composition is? You can get test kits from the extension services at USU. So you can figure it out that way. But an easy way to figure out is called the spit test. You just take like a golf ball sized portion of soil in your hand and spit in it or put a little water in it, and then use your finger to kind of move it around. If it doesn't ball up at all, then it's sandy soil. If it balls up into several little balls, then it's sandy loam soil, and sandy loam soil is the most desirable soil. And if it balls up into one big ball, then that's clay soil. So that's an easy way, non-technical, to figure it out. But if you want to know for sure, then use like one of the extension services kits to figure that out.
There's one other little method for that as well, is you can try to get a little core, the best you can, of your soil sample, put it in a quart jar, glass jar of some kind. You can put just a tiny bit of dish detergent in there, which kind of, again, serves as a surfactant to break the soil particles apart a little bit. Shake it all up real good and then just let it sit. Put water in it and let it sit. And then those layers, sand will settle first, then silts, then clays. And then depending, you can kind of see some layering, which could give you a % of sand, silt, and clay. Organics float to the top. It's not perfect, but it may give you a rough percentage of a soil profile of here's how much of it's sand, here's how much clay and silt. You can actually see distinctive layers if you shake that up with some water, let it settle out overnight. You can see some layering there. And then, the real basic though is definitely a soil test from Utah State would give you total % composition, micronutrients, macronutrients, and then recommendations for soil improvement generally. But that's great. And somebody asked about missing the first part of this. Can you watch it later? Absolutely. It'll be posted. This is recorded. It'll be posted on our website sometime tomorrow, just weberbasin.com. Same place where you signed up for the classes, and on our Drought. We have a Drought page. It'll be on that Drought page as well. So please look for it there. Eric, thanks for your time tonight. Really appreciate it. And anybody that has, other questions, you're welcome to contact us at Weber Basin. You can call our main number. You can email me, drice@weberbasin.com. And anyway, thank you very much. Eric?